Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our RASE meeting today. It is 7:03. I think we have everyone with us, and we have Rachel. Rachel, do you just want to introduce yourself? Um, if there's anything you would like to discuss with us during this meeting, otherwise, we can just go ahead and go into the agenda.
Um, yeah, I'm happy to just introduce myself. I'm Rachel Mowery. I am the um, Chevy Chase Main Street manager. I just started back in October. And I'm really just trying to hop in on as many calls as I can over the next couple weeks just to figure out what's going on in the community and figure out ways that I can help, bring information to you guys from business owners and vice versa, and just really figure out what my role is here in the community.
Okay. Thank you. So the first item on our agenda today is just to confirm that the ANC approved our 2024 meetings. So those are the third Tuesdays of each month. So we have those dates set out from January to December. The next item, any discussion before I move on to the next item? Nope. Okay.
Go for it.
The next item was that we had provided the ANC a letter in regards to the Ivy City to support them, and that letter was, or our recommendation to the ANC was approved. And then any discussion with that? I don't think so. No. So then the next, yes, Lisa.
Just to add, the resolution was also approved and it was unanimous. We got everyone that was present in agreement. So I was very happy with that.
6-0.
Yeah, it was great. And there were two friendly amendments, one from Commissioner Lynch to copy Montgomery County official because the facility is actually owned by a Chevy Chase, Maryland resident. And there was another friendly amendment. So I'm in a process of making those amendments and then getting it signed and distributed to the agency's officials, just to let you guys know that.
Okay, thank you for the update, Lisa. Okay. So the next item on the agenda is the historic Chevy Chase designation letter. And I know there were a couple of items that came through from Carl and Maurice. So I don't know if you guys have a preference. I'll just turn it over to you both. You can choose which item or topic of discussion you want to go through first.
Carl, how would you like to handle it?
You go for it.
Okay. Karennthya, can I share my screen, please?
Yes. Do I have to give you that permission?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me see. I have one person can, no, I don't want to share. Do I have to make him a host, Lisa? Let me see. I'm gonna say multiple.
I think you have to make me a co-host. Yeah.
Co-host.
Oh, advanced sharing option.
You got it? I can
No.
try.
Let me. Oh, I got
Yeah,
it.
I've got it. I've got it.
There you
Okay.
go.
I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here. So I'll try to be quick. How much time do we have on the agenda for this?
You know what? I didn't point out any times. So
okay. So basically what Carl and I did was this is the I read through the application, which is it's 153 pages.
Wow.
I did not read every single word of every page because a lot of this is just listing of addresses and such. But what I did was I summarized everything in the document let me see if I can view this as how many, I don't know if I can view Zoom. Let's go to a page where, there we go. Okay, so what I basically did was I went through it and I tried to summarize, Carl and I tried to summarize the key points. So the first thing is this link up at the top is the link to the to this document. So this is the application. And so we tried to boil the 153-page application down into this like 2 or 3 page, or I guess it's a 4-page document. So basically it was filed in on November 19th of last year. Here are the boundaries. There's a total of however many those two numbers together, 691 buildings. 65% of them they claim are contributing to the historic designation, and there's already 5 places within those boundaries that have a historic designation for those specific places. Then there's a summary of the application, which is basically, here's what it is. Connecticut Avenue is the main thoroughfare through this commercial district. It has some of the older subdivisions. Carl and I asterisked this quote because this citation or citations like this appear throughout the document, which is basically the intent of Chevy Chase DC was to be insulated from the rest of the city from a cultural and economic perspective. And again, that's back in the early 1900s. And that there were racial covenants early on, and there were mandated setbacks and minimum building costs. And I went on a couple of different sites, and about a $3,000 or $5,000 minimum building cost on a lot back in 1906 would be the equivalent of about a $600,000 in today's construction costs. The fact that it might have been originally planned by a couple developers was actually overcome by the fact that there was a number of different architects and builders. There is some shared characteristics across them, according to the application. And the 5 locations that are already have designations are what they list the Chevy Chase Savings Bank because this was back when I think with this original application was filed. It's now PNC, the arcade, the theater, and then there's Chevy Chase Circle itself, which has the Francis Newland's Memorial Fountain, which has been renamed by the National Park Service, and the Garden Club of America entrance markers. So those are all there. And then there's a narrative description, which sort of just goes through kind of the history about how it came about and talks about sort of the marketing campaigns and advertising and, you know, sort of the how, you know, it evolved over time. And so there's just different sections about that. Then there's actually a inventory of every single building, all those 691 buildings. And it has like a grid data that has lot and square, year built. They categorize the style, who was the architect, who was the builder, what type of property. Is it a single dwelling? Is it commercial? Is it a school, a church, you know, something like that. And then they highlight that there's 2 main reasons for this area deserving historic designation. One is these are like pre-populated options, and they click 2 of the boxes in 2 of the options. One was it's associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of our history, and that it embodies distinctive characteristics of a type, period, and method of construction, works of a master, high artistic values, a significant and distinguishable entity whose components lack individual distinction. And the fact that it's got like 150 different architects and a lot of different styles, I don't know how that matches up with that one, but they claim it does. Maybe it's just because of the fact that it is somewhat of a variety of style. The significance of events in history and contribution, they claim that it's an example of community planning and residential development for DC, as well as a good snapshot into the themes of architecture and community planning. They're talking about how it was a catalyst for the development of the rest of Northwest DC. And then this is kind of like a straight, this number 3, I mean, this is a straight quote from there. And again, they're talking about that they wanted to limit the type of buyers in this community, particularly persons of color, before the inclusion of explicit deed restrictions became commonplace. And we've got those double asterisks again, because they're bringing up the fact that it was created to be racially restrictive. And so it's hard to tell, and I'll get to that in a minute, but it looks like that's part of the reason of why this is historic, is because this was a practice back then. And they really talk about a very broad period from 1906 to 1964, which is the justification. And then let's see, and then they provide a long history going back to, before settlers arrived. And again, they bring up, they do that. They bring up the racial covenants again about how those were employed. And then there's an appendix that has a map of the boundaries. They kind of overlay the different subdivisions in the boundaries. They kind of point out 20 areas of interest within the boundaries as examples. And then they they have some included photos of these areas. And so this last part is sort of like what Carl and I put together as questions for RASE. Well, I guess let me just do that real quick and then we'll open any questions. So one is, how much should the racial history of Chevy Chase matter in the designation of a historic district? And should the HPRB reward neighborhoods with recognition for their racist origins? It's sort of, it's hard not to come to a conclusion, and I say this down here, is that the fact that its origins were exclusionary in nature, it's part of their application. And so it looks like it's hard not to conclude that the fact that it was exclusionary and they had racial covenants and a history of racial discrimination is part of the reason why it should be a historic district. If I say that right, it's hard not to come to that conclusion. There are already some buildings that have received designation. So does the whole district need to be preserved? That's another question. And then we've talked about this before, but Mary Rouse is the one who submitted this request. We know she also runs the listserv, and this application kind of came out of nowhere. I went back and looked, and I don't think it was mentioned after March of last year, and there was no sort of, we know that there's a lot of flagging of things of interest on the listserv, but this seemed to happen without any notice. And so the question is, because of her activities, is she a disinterested partner here? And just, we need to take that into consideration. Again, the timing of why was it resubmitted now? It doesn't seem like it's a coincidence that we've been having the conversation around the civic core, and this thing was submitted. The rules say that it will be reviewed within several months, but there needs to be community feedback, and the ANC has to weigh in. But there's no indication that they've opened up for additional feedback or even let the ANC know that this was filed. And just the implications of what were to happen if this application were approved. And the fact that the point is that the neighborhood evolved naturally with lots of different styles over lots of different periods. And this would actually freeze it. It would stop the process that allowed the neighborhood to develop the way it's developed. And then the last thing is a question of, as the standing committee, what do we do? Do we proactively go to the ANC with our review and recommendations of them, and what are they? And if we do that, that obviously means making a presentation at a meeting, and it would likely stir up a lot of controversy and emotions, which we've already seen a lot of other people involved. So just things to consider. Any questions or comments on any of this? Or Carl, do you want to add anything? I know you wanted to review the I see Cal, you have your hand raised. I know you wanted to review the mailer, Carl. Go ahead, Cal.
Oh, I want to go back to this thing about the ANC position. I saw somewhere on the listserv in the past week, some community member posted something that there was in another neighborhood, the ANC voted 7-2 against. I think this is one of the Southeast wards. Against having it, and the HPRB went ahead and did it anyway.
Huh.
So
I didn't
That's
see
correct.
that. Okay.
yeah.
I forget which neighborhood it was, but that's correct, Cal.
Yeah. So I just wondered how much this ANC position will carry, this to an end result, or at least how much will influence the end result.
I mean, they did reply. This, from what I understand from Carl, this application is not that materially different from the one that was rejected back in, what was it, 2004, 2007?
Well, remember that the effort in 2000, whatever it was, the previous effort in this neighborhood was not rejected by HPRB. It was withdrawn and not submitted because there was a petition, a survey, whatever, within the ANC that found that there wasn't support for it, so it was withdrawn.
Yeah, this is a different situation because Mary's already submitted the app.
Yeah, but she could always withdraw it.
So
the thing to remember with HPRB, with preservation generally, is that HPRB is limited to only considering historic significance, and actually it would not actually be allowed to take ANC support in consideration. In reality, practically speaking, they do. If there isn't support in the community, generally they will not act contrary to that. But it's not always the case when there is overwhelming historic preservation reason to do something.
I have one quick follow-up question, and then I'll keep quiet for a while. I wonder how much of this motivation for this is based on the attempt to block these new huge, houses from going up that are monstrous houses on a relatively small lots, across the street, around the corner from me. I personally don't like them either. But, just in terms of position, is there a way that can be affected without having to go through this historic district business? And maybe this is like a side issue. I don't know if this is a side issue or part of the main thing.
The historic preservation staff these days, and also the board itself, considers themselves to be very progressive, and is very likely to only approve something here if it is accompanied by guidelines for how to work within within the good graces, if you will, of HPRB. Like, how would you build on Connecticut Avenue in a historic district, and do something that's acceptable? They were very involved in the new design guidelines Connecticut Avenue design guidelines down in Woodley Park and Cleveland Park, and would look to be involved up here. Whether or not they would also do design guidelines for how to build additions or replacement houses in the single family area, I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did.
I just wonder if there's a way that motivation, if that's really there, we have to find out, I guess, can be handled some way other than having a historic district. Because, a lot of those houses are, in my view, are blights on the neighborhood.
Well, that's your view. That is a view, and I know it's shared by some people. And I know that in the earlier effort to put the historic district in place, a lot of people who supported it supported it for the very reason that they didn't like the McMansions. But I don't think the notion that you can change Mary Rouse's mind to do something other than this is probably not going to happen.
I just was wondering if that was the whole reason why they're doing this. Anyway,
no, it's half the reason. The other half is she thinks she can prevent Connecticut Avenue from being developed. It is an anti-development effort in sheep's clothing.
We've got Carl raising his hand. Carl, did you want to go in?
Olivia, use the hand raiser thing because it.
I don't know where it is on my computer. It's under reactions. It's not appearing.
Yes, it is. You just click on the thing itself, not the little doohickey next to it.
Oh, I see. Yeah, because I've had my hand raised, but it's just not working on the.
Oh,
got it.
I apologize. So I see. Okay, Libby, and then Carl.
That was my question, Ron. You were just addressing. Would this designation prevent us from having affordable housing on the Civic Core site?
Personally, I think not, because the same people who would be at HPRB are the same people who just participated in guidelines that would allow, 8-story buildings in Cleveland Park and 10-story buildings in Woodley. They think they can do design guidelines that will still allow denser development up here.
Okay. My other comment was, given the racially exclusive nature of the neighborhood, it just seems that, clinging to historic preservation is the wrong message to send in certain ways. And that if something were to be done to accentuate the nature of the neighborhood, we should be doing something rather than being rewarded for maintaining. It seems that the onus is on the neighborhood to do something to show that we have moved beyond, because it's no secret that our neighborhood was built on this past. I don't know what that is. I don't know how that translates into, a demonstration architecturally in the neighborhood. But to me, that's in itself a big point. And then, this notion of significance, the word significance is just problematic, because some say it's significant because of this history. Some say it's significant because of the materials that are used. Some say it's significant because of the style. But I think that the regulations that were, this is apparently regulations designed to protect historic material rather than prioritizing the needs of the people living in and using these places now.
Right. Historic preservation, and Carl can speak to this. I'm sure he's got his hand up. I'll shut up. But historic preservation is about historic significance. It's not about people. It's not about the community. It's not about anything other than the significance historically or individually of the structures in the neighborhood.
And I just think that that's a message that kind of flies in the face of what we need to be accomplishing now, but that's, debatable.
Carl, you should speak up. You've got your hand up.
Yeah, I do have my hand up. I've been waiting to be recognized. So I have a couple of comments here, I think. On the question of whether RASE should be interested in this, I think there's no question that we should be interested in it because of what Maurice has already pointed out about the historical accuracy of the application and pointing out that race played a major role in creating the community to begin with. Let me kind of concretize that with an example. A house that was just remodeled in the park, just on Casada Street, that borders on Lafayette Pointer Park now, has a price attached to it of several $1 million, right? That's just on the market now. The people that were displaced from what became this all whites park and school didn't get that money, didn't have a chance in their generations of their family to be in the position to have a house like that so that they would be able to benefit from it. They were excluded because they were Black from the neighborhood. So the question is, the question of racial equity is at the heart, it seems to me, of the question of whether we want a historic district or not. Which brings up another point. In order to do preservation, do you have to have a historic district? This is a point that someone else also made already. There are 5 structures that have been recognized and are on a national history of historical preservation. Now, do we really need to freeze in time the entire neighborhood in order to make individual decisions about individual structures, like the PNC Bank or the Avalon Theater, et cetera, right? Is that necessary? So there are alternatives that we ought to be thinking about here in balancing preservation on the one hand with racial equity on the other. And yeah, so that would, those would be my initial comments. First, that I think this committee very definitely has an interest in what happens here. And second, keeping in mind the alternatives to a historic district from the point of view of balancing preservation and development.
Carl, do you want to go over the, sorry, Ron, did you want to go over the mailer as a supplement to this? Because that was sort of a organic response to the fact that this application was filed. I'm happy to pull it up on the screen here.
Sure.
Maurice, before we do that, could I make a couple of comments? One is just a question to you and Carl, because I haven't read the application in detail. So the period of significance runs to 1964.
Right.
Yes.
And it seems to me that if the historical importance of Chevy Chase is its planning and conception and everything, that train left the station about 50 years before 1964. So I'm just wondering what if any justification was made for the period of significance running to 1964.
Well, we actually entertained Mary Rouse, who is the applicant here, in HCCDC at our board meeting last week.
Lucky you.
And I asked her that question, that very question. And her answer was that that's when the last apartment building was built in 1964 along Connecticut Avenue within the geographic scope of the proposed district. But it just so happens that she also includes as a contributing building precisely those properties that would come into consideration for affordable housing if they ever changed ownership. For instance, the Wells Fargo Bank is considered by her to be a contributing structure, despite the fact that it was only built in the, I guess, late 50s or early 60s, just short of the 1964 cutoff point for her temporal definition of the
and Safeway also, I assume.
And the same thing is true for Safeway too. So those areas, whether or not you're for a historic district, it seems to me that there's a case to be made that there's some overreach, even in terms of the application that's made here.
Okay, and I would add to that I know from conversations I've had with unnamed individuals that HP staff, Office of Historic Preservation staff, is very aware that there's a anti-development subtext here, and they are even if they do approve a historic district here, I think their guidelines and such are will take that into consideration. The Office of Staff at Historic Preservation is not inclined to let preservation be used as a land use tool for those sort of sites.
I heard someone else wanting to speak.
Can I respond to?
Go ahead, Carl.
Just since I'm on a roll, so to speak, I wanted to respond to something that Ron said before about the fundamental criteria that are used to judge by the HPRB whether they will take on board this proposal as a historic district. And until relatively recently, I think it was true that it was only about architecture, it was only about the structures. But I think that has changed. I think the HPRB has adopted and has been mandated to take into account the history as well. There's a literature out there that's important to keep in mind. There are some studies that have done about what the racial and social justice implications of historic districts are, and they seem to point to making it more difficult for communities to evolve in the direction of more diversity. Okay. And so there's a prior question here, a kind of meta question about whether or not historic districts at large have an impact on the kinds of diversity questions that this committee, I think, has been created to entertain. I could also say something, if you like, about the flyer that I sent around by the opponents group.
Please.
I'm in touch with those people that are behind this, and they've explained it to me that their focus, as you can see here, is not what I've just been talking about. It's not about the racial dimension. For whatever reason, they decided they were going to concentrate on other questions about the convenience of or inconvenience that is created. So in reading through this flyer, you will see that it basically makes an appeal to people to oppose the historic district idea because it creates difficulties for people in remodeling their houses, essentially. And that leads, however, to another observation about the fundamental point, the fundamental argument in the historic district application. If you read it closely, what jumps out at you, and this is something that I think Maurice has also alluded to without being explicit about it, what is celebrated in the proposal is the idea of the eclecticism of the neighborhood. And that eclecticism came of structures, actually. And that eclecticism came about in the period of the 1920s when most of this happened. Because there were many dozens of architects working with many subdividers and property owners to do their own thing, basically. And you can look at this as kind of a fundamental contradiction, right? And this connects with the point, I think, that the opponents and their flyer are trying to make. If it's true that what is being celebrated and what the applicant wants to argue is the reason to have a historic district is this eclecticism, this revivalist style and the way it was developed in the neighborhood. Then by freezing in time the housing that we now have, in essence, what you do is deprive the current generation of owners the same genius that was at work with those that created this eclecticism to begin with in the 1920s and 30s. You follow me? So there's a kind of basic contradiction at work here. And I think that's what the opponents are relying on for their argument, if I understand them correctly.
I'm going to put my architect hat on right now and say that that is what Carl just outlined, to me, is the strongest argument against this historic district. It's saying we really like our neighborhood, so we're going to take the energy and life force, if you will, that created it this way, and freeze it, and just stop doing that stuff, and have it be this way all the time, because for some reason this way, the way it is right now, is the best it could be, and that's just not true. And regardless, Cal is mentioning he doesn't like the big houses. Well, you know what? The big houses are part of that that eclecticism. They're part of that funky growth in the neighborhood. Now, that said, it's the one argument that I don't think RASE has any business making, because it just isn't. It has nothing to do with our issues. Yeah. I think for us, one of the two big issues are we celebrating somehow a racist history, and is that something we want to do? And the other one is that if the ultimate result of a historic district is to make this neighborhood even more exclusive by not allowing more density, by not allowing people to expand their houses or whatever, and to ultimately increase prices. If we're making it more exclusive, more exclusivity in Washington, D.C. disproportionately impacts people of color. And is that something that that we want to do? I think that's a RASE kind of argument.
Maria has her hand raised.
I guess my question is, when we do the historical districts, do we say that we're making this a historical district because at some point it used to be a sunset city? Or are we saying we're going to make it historical district because we like the architecture? At some point, whoever did this architecture was one of our best architects in the United States of America? Or are we saying that we're going to make it and I believe this is what Cal was saying, maybe that we're going to say this is a historical district because it only takes into account a very small part of Chevy Chase, DC?
I mean, it looks like the applicants are making multiple arguments, some of which you just raised. And I guess the question for us as RASE is to what stance, if any, do we take on this from a racial and social equity perspective? Because some of those we're not qualified to talk about, the architectural significance of this, or the building code issues or things like that.
So my thoughts, initially, like, this historic thing makes me like very frustrated, because for me, as a Black woman, I feel that this preservation is not about like, it's not about, we have this train station from 1875 and we're trying to preserve it and it's just such great history. For me, when I think of this application, I think of this neighborhood. This neighborhood was, designed to be a white enclave, and we don't want that to change. We have this fear of, if Connecticut is developed, we will no longer be able to preserve that part of us. So I think if RASE does have a point, we need to point out the significance of that. And I think we need to point out that part because, again, I'm not an architecture. These houses here don't look no different than some of the houses in Brooklyn or other parts of the city. And if people want historic districts on their home, I think, doing it individually versus like forcing others to do it if they don't want to do it. So that's just my 2 cents. But this topic is just like significant heartburn for me, and it makes me frustrated because I can see the underlying intent versus, we're trying to preserve the manger from baby Jesus from the 1700s or something like that.
I got that in my basement.
Yeah, and I think it's a question also of shouldn't we be prioritizing, given our history, the impression, the feeling that Karennthya has? Shouldn't that, to what extent should that outweigh, given our history, the desire for other people to keep things the same? I also think it would be good if we could talk more about the future, because this focus on history is one thing, but we're in a city that needs to continue to grow and evolve. And we all know the trends that are occurring in terms of the economy and the difficulty for housing, and that in itself, we need to be thinking about the future families, generations to come, instead of focusing on obviously the status quo.
One of the nuances of the arguments for the historic district and the realities is that Mary Rouse is always posting on the listserv, whatever, that the historic district gives the community more control of what happens. She bases that on the fact that any building permit in a historic district has to be reviewed by HPRB or historic preservation staff, and that's a process that includes a presentation at the ANC, even if it's a what's called matter of right development. And she is framing that as community input into what gets built in the community. Well, when the sort of reality is that the decision, the ANC has no actual approval rights in that process. The approval rights still lay with HPRB, who is going to make their decision primarily based on historic preservation considerations and not on what the community wants or as Marilee says, the future. It's going to be based, or as Karennthya says, on the racial history, exclusivity history. They're going to make it on the historic preservation merits. And, the people who are opposing this don't think we should give up this, give up that sort of control to the HPRB. The HPRB, by the way, the board right now is very friendly to a lot of the concerns we might have up here, but that's not to say they always will be. It's a matter of who the individuals on the board are at any one time.
So maybe we shouldn't be afraid of having it go to the board with a statement about how we feel.
We shouldn't be afraid. No.
I think that, if this thing went to the board tomorrow, staff is not going to send it to the board for approval until design guidelines are done. That'll take, 8 or 9 months, a year, something like that. And the guidelines will probably be generally acceptable in terms of increased density and all that. But once it's a historic district, there's no telling how future boards and staff will deal with it. Plus the fact that
jump in for a minute. We've
Yeah,
got
I'm sorry.
Maria with her hand raised. We've got, I think, 9 minutes left in the meeting here. We may not be able to come to a conclusion or a consensus tonight of what RASE wants to do. So maybe you can have some action items of things we can work on or consider for the next meeting. But
is Lisa still on? Lisa, what's going to happen Monday at the ANC?
This is not on the agenda. I can tell
Oh,
you
it's
that.
not? What? I thought it was. Got
No.
taken off?
It wasn't on.
okay.
Nobody asked for it to be on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was going to be on.
Uh-uh.
How do we ask for it to be on?
Send an email to me.
But are we ready for that? I think at some point we would want it to be
No.
on the agenda, but we need to figure out what it is we want to
Oh, yeah, no, I
pass on
thought there
before
was
we
gonna
get
be
it on the agenda.
a Mary Rouse presentation, and a Living Chevy Chase presentation on Monday.
No,
But if that's not happening, then that's not something we can respond to.
right.
And Ron, maybe you could check, because maybe it is happening, but not within the context of an ANC meeting. I haven't read all the listserv posts, but
I haven't
No, I
seen
thought it
anything
was,
recently on that.
I was under the impression that it was going to be on the ANC agenda.
Yeah.
okay.
Maria, you've had your hand raised.
Well, as only for this to be historical, they have to come up with a reason why it's historical. And all I could think of it is because of Newland. And that's the only reason why we would be involved as the race is because of Newland. And only reason why we wouldn't want it after they have become a historical district is because it takes so much money to actually fix a house that is now historical. And I don't know what else we can say is that it's because of Newland why we're objecting to it. What else could we say?
That's concrete. It's true.
Yep.
Carl, and then Kyle has his hand raised as well.
Yeah, in terms of the timing of what we do, I think it deserves mention that there will be attempts by at least my group to bring the opponents and proponents of the historic district together in a kind of panel format to discuss it. That's not going to happen until the springtime. And I have the sense, Lisa, tell me if I'm wrong about this, and Ron also, that the HPRB is not going to do anything until the ANC does something.
Yep.
Yeah, ANC, and also staff is very important in this process, and it's my understanding that staff is likely to tell the board that they want to consider what guidelines would look like for this area before they send it to the board. They don't want to keep going back to the board. They want to go with a full package, and that'll take months and months and months.
Yeah, I just to finish my point, I really think it's incumbent upon this committee to make up its own mind about how to react to this and not wait months to hear from. I mean, of course, we're all talking to other people. It's not to bar ourselves from hearing from this, but to anyway, to begin thinking about where this group stands on the issues. We don't have to wait for public-facing meetings of
Agreed.
proponents and opponents to do this. It should be up to us.
How about if we reconvene either at our next regular meeting or at a special meeting of this committee and just review the points to consider, these bullet points that you guys put together sort of one by one, and see if we can develop a info sheet or an opinion on these items and transmit that to the ANC and or make it public on the listserv, whatever, just to make sure people understand that there are certain implications and consequences of a district without necessarily taking a position on some of the substantive matters that are outside of our mission. Just stick with the racial stuff.
Cal has his hand raised.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that I was gonna advocate not waiting until the next meeting, and see how much we can do online, because we do put together a lot of our documents and positions online without having to meet, or Now I just heard a suggestion we have a special meeting, which I think is also potentially a good idea as well. But I suggest we not wait until the next meeting before we do anything.
Especially since we've had this discussion while we're, thinking, reading, we can continue to do the work and some research too.
And I want to say one more thing, Lisa. I think we're at the point now we probably need to start expanding beyond an hour. We mostly did 90-minute meetings, but we could try 75 minutes and see if we can do it. Because as we get more and more into what we're doing, we're going to need more time together in our meetings.
I prefer sticking with an hour when we can.
Yeah, I can't dedicate an hour, but I mean more than an hour, but I'm all for communicating offline.
Right, and Cal, what you were saying about we can continue to communicate online about these issues, maybe contribute towards an info sheet.
Well, if someone could put together a draft info sheet, we could all respond to it.
I
I see
think
Carl
what
has his hand raised for that.
Yeah, well, I think you've done that already. I mean, I think
yeah, I
that's
was gonna say that too. I think
tonight.
what Maurice did is a good.
I think
agree.
I think more to the point is that the process has been underway, although it hasn't been public facing in a broad sense. In other words, there's been a mobilization going on for the proponents of the historic district for some time, and they've got now I think the number is over 100 letters that have been sent to the HPRB supporting the idea of a historic district already. So if we want to have an effect on the further what the HPRB does, then I think it's wise for us to move sooner rather than later.
So here's the challenge I had with that, Carl, is I like looking at it, I had a hard time figuring out how to like actually comment on this process here. So if we take a look here at the Office of Planning and there's this case, it just says a copy of the nomination and letters received by the public are listed here, but there's no, it doesn't, I couldn't find where there's a process to actually see the timeline or to submit letters. So when you click on this, so here's the complete application. And if we look in, I'll be honest, so there's 160 in support. You can read each of these. And then if we go back, there are only 3 letters of opposition.
So is the
Well,
city
that's-
uploading?
But I don't even know how these got there. And like,
Yeah.
because that's what I don't understand is I don't understand the process to submit a letter in support or a letter against.
The answer is process again. I think the proponents have run a very good campaign without general community outreach. The last time this was done in 2007, the ANC organized a survey of people in the community. And the reason why that application was rescinded is because the community weighed in 3-1 against the idea of historic district. So this time around, the proponents have been much more clever and kind of short-circuited the community outreach
But I
Uh,
guess the question is, how did these 3 opposition letters make it here? And how did the 100
The board
plus?
gives you an opportunity, so there will be an opportunity for the community to provide feedback. They'll,
So
once
this-
they publish the timeline or the notice, they'll notice it and they'll have instructions for the ANC and the community to provide feedback. So you'll have all that information when they actually notice it to the community.
But that still doesn't
Yeah,
answer the question
also,
of, it still doesn't answer the question of how they got these. I'm guessing they did a big mass, so they gathered all the letters together, sent them as an attachment to the email to somebody on the board directly. Because if there doesn't seem to be any way to submit these things, that's the only answer I can come up with.
Yeah.
They collected the letters and sent them all in one package.
Yeah,
That's
well,
what I get.
it is the case that we know this, that the proponents have been working very closely with HPO, the part of the Office of Planning that deals with preservation, right? And so this thing has been greased from within, so to speak, over a long period.
And I wonder how many of these are going to be boilerplate, like the same thing.
Some of them are, and some of them are, yeah, some of them are more like form letters, and others are not.
I mean,
Carl,
but don't,
go ahead.
I'm just going to say, there is a group called Living Chevy Chase that is basically opposed to this and is starting to gear up, and they are playing catch up because the proponents have gotten out in front with all their letters and everything. But as Living Chevy Chase starts to get its act together over the next weeks and months, there'll be plenty of opportunities to send form letters, and they'll identify places, emails to send them to, and have stuff on their website. And the opposition will get better organized, I'm sure. So I wouldn't worry about that. There'll be plenty of opportunity to state your position.
Libby, and then Lisa dropped off, but I'm gonna have to drop off soon. So Libby, go ahead, and then maybe we can kind of determine how we want to do our next steps.
I'm just curious again, how does HPRB interact within Office of Planning? Does Office of Planning have the last say, or is it two completely separate?
HPRB has the last, pretty much the last say. There is a process of appeal that goes to before somebody called the mayor's agent, which is often the director of the Office of Planning, to overrule HPRB, and sometimes it happens and mostly it doesn't.
Okay.
And the HPRB, the Historic Preservation staff, excuse me, they are Office of Planning employees and operate within that bureaucracy, but they report to the HPRB.
Okay, so thanks for sharing that, Maurice. I'm gonna send in my own letter of opposition outside of this. So Maurice has given us a good starting point of, I guess, our like points to consider, and then some of the things that he pointed out from the application. So I guess our next step is that we want to come up with, I know someone mentioned a FAQ document. Oh, Rachel, you have it. Is that a hand? Oh no, that's not. Sorry, that's my thing over it. It looks so weird. Sorry. So we wanted to do like a FAQ document or some some points. To me, in my mind, what I think is like we would, like we do with all the other things we come about, is state our position, yay or nay for something and the reasons why. Anybody have any other thoughts, or do we want to take this offline and talk about it?
Well, what I thought I heard was the suggestion that we create a position, not just an FAQ. Is that what we're also talking about? Or are we just making this as an info sheet?
We can do that, to create the position. We create a position. And I think how we create our position, we build upon what Maurice already documented.
And that position could go just to the ANC, you know, as a recommendation from us, just like we've done with the other recommendations we've done to them. And
Like
then then
like
they
a
could be the,
memo,
pardon?
like a memo that we've been
Yeah,
sending.
yeah, or you
General-
know, I forget how we've done it. We've done it 2 or 3 times, I think. And so we're not actually engaging with this directly with the public. We let the ANC handle that by putting it on their agenda.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I would say yes and no. I would like to see if we do that. Obviously, given who we are, our memo is going to be to the ANC. It's essentially going to say whether we take a position or not. It's going to say, as you consider this, here are recognize there are some racial dimensions to it, and tick them off and discuss them perhaps. I would hope that that document could be in a form that the Living Chevy Chase people could link to or somehow include in their website, et cetera, because they're not going to go down that road. They're going down a different road of, like Carl says, convenience and cost to homeowners, that sort of thing. So if we could do something that would supplement what they're doing and give them an opportunity to link to it, that would be good.
And just to be clear, you know, what I viewed, you know, as guiding my review of this was to, one, try to summarize a 153-page document best I could, and then 2, kind of call out the aspects of it that were more relevant to our mission and our charter, and then 3, give us some things to think about and talk about. I didn't want to presuppose any actual actions or positions. So just raising them for our discussion, which is what we're doing right now, which is exactly what was intended. So what Carl and I created is just the start of the process of thinking about what stance do we want to take, what position do we want to take from a racial and social equity perspective.
So what we're doing is creating a position that will be in the form of a memo to address the racial dimension of historic preservation in Chevy Chase, given that that's our mission and our purview.
Yeah, we have to
I think pretty much.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I guess, and I don't know if it's a separate thing or not, an FAQ or info sheet that could have more general use as we go down the road, I would think,
Info sheet about what?
about this issue.
Well, that could be used as a supplement, like for Chevy Chase, Living Chevy Chase, or whatever that group is called.
Yeah.
Living DC or group, where we can other groups can leverage it as needed to take a look at a dimension, because in looking through some of the applications, those letters, I just glanced at a few of them. Some of them are saying that because you create this historic preservation, you will improve inclusivity
And
Yeah.
affordability.
and
Right, I saw that.
affordability.
So
Because
they don't use the word inclusivity. Oh, they use inclusivity, but not
They do.
inclusion.
No, inclusivity, because I think what they're basically saying is it'll cap people from making McMansions. It'll slow down the real estate price increases, which will make it more affordable to other people. And therefore, since it's more affordable, different types of people can come in. That looks like that's sort of their different way of thinking. I shouldn't say backward,
Right,
but
right.
they're
Houses would stay smaller.
The way they didn't use the word inclusion, they use inclusivity.
inclusivity. But the point is they're basically saying this will help, erase our past. By
They're saying
preserving our
houses
past,
will-
erases our past.
Houses will
there's-
stay smaller, so they'll stay more affordable and they'll be available to more people. And my response to that is, how did that work out in Georgetown?
And it's not true,
You know,
because I'm looking for the
of
small
course
one.
it's not true.
Did
Yeah,
not work
Georgetown,
out.
Right, because
tiny
nothing
little
here is,
houses that get
nothing
more and
here
more
is,
expensive because they're more and more exclusive.
nothing here is affordable. I mean,
Unless we create
not in the way of a
the
house.
units, unless we create the units, the affordable housing. That's precisely why I'm hoping this group wants to make the case for affordable housing at the Civic Core and other places.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay, so what is the next step? If we're looking to create some sort of document, whether it's FAQ or a statement or series of points or whatever, what's going to happen next?
My
So the next
suggestion,
step, the next step is we need someone to volunteer to start drafting the position as the ANC, to draft the position for our recommendation, and then from that we can build upon this info document that the other groups can leverage, and we can kind of build upon what Carl and Maurice did already. So I'm gonna
I was
volunteer
gonna
myself
I'll
now.
start.
so I was going to suggest the opposite order, because I think that creating the info sheet or FAQ will help us to hone in and get clear and crystal clear and concrete about our position.
I
That's-
think,
A stab, Cal, at the info sheet?
Pardon?
You want to take a stab at the info sheet?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm more inclined to do the other one, but I mean, with somebody else, I could work on it with somebody else. I don't like to work alone on these things. So if somebody else wants to work on it with me,
I do think the points to consider in evaluating the application that Maurice presented here at the end of his document provides a good guideline for moving forward.
Yeah,
Karennthya, I'll work with
uh,
you on a
Great
memo.
question.
Ron suggested a while ago that we convene to specifically address those questions that are listed at the bottom of Maurice's summary, right?
Agreed.
Points to consider. And if we can do that, a position might emerge out of that.
Okay.
Yeah,
agree
I
with
think that is somebody taking notes on that discussion. If we can discipline ourselves to go point by point, somebody taking notes will have a good start to drafting a little paragraph position on each of those points.
You mean take notes as we discuss them?
Yeah,
I'll take notes. And
Yay.
Karennthya was talking about working on a memo. I'm happy to do
Oh,
that.
I said, oh, yeah.
Oh, you
okay.
were you weren't stepping up.
I was not, I said I was gonna unvolunteer myself this time.
But the discussion about the points to consider would be the beginning of a memo. So I think
exactly.
right.
they're
So-
not two separate things.
So, Libby sort of, what is the word? Voluntold me. No, to step up to do and work on an info sheet, a draft of an info sheet. Is that what you were suggesting, Libby? And I'm saying,
I think you
yes,
would
I
be
can
great
do
if
it, but I would like to do it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think it would be very helpful if you could, work on an info sheet and then we can meet to address the points to consider that Maurice puts at the end of his resume summary.
So those points would be both in both things, both efforts. They would be in the info sheet and they would also be part of our position
I don't know
paper
if it's
memo or whatever.
I,
What?
I,
Just,
I, I
I,
kinda
I,
see the
I
info
wouldn't,
sheet is like more like factual background. Do you?
that's just a format thing, Cal. I think once we can externalize our position in writing on Maurice's points, then how we format that in as frequently asked questions or as a memo or whatever is the secondary task. I think the primary task is just to externalize our position and get it in writing.
Well, as I said, I'm willing to do it, but I really like to do it with somebody else. Anybody else want to help with that?
I'm happy to review anything anybody generates for what I know about how the process works and whatever modest editorial skills I have. But I can't take a lead on this. I just don't have the bandwidth right now.
I'll draft like a memo format and put some stuff in it and everybody can start adding theirs. Wow.
That's for the other thing, right? We're talking about two separate documents, aren't we?
I think we're talking about three now. We're talking about meeting to discuss points to consider, which is at the end of Maurice's explanation here. Then we're talking about fact points, and we're talking about a memorandum. I think we're talking about three different things that are overlapping. It doesn't seem very.
Well,
Make sense?
Yeah, but doesn't everything flow from the first of those?
Yes.
Yeah, I think the first of those has to be enmeshed in both of the other two.
Yeah.
So I
So
think we'll end up with
why don't
two.
we get the first done
I
and
think we'll
then
end up with- which is
address how to go get it into different formats.
What is the first?
the first one is to work with the points to the bottom of Reese's document.
Yeah.
The points of interest or whatever they're called, points
Mhm.
of consideration. So, all right, I can start with that, but I think you were talking about, somebody was talking about taking notes as we discuss it. Does that mean we're gonna have another meeting to do this? Or what are we
Well,
doing?
that's another way of doing it, I guess. Either you could just draft and we can talk about it, or we can have another meeting of just, a disciplined hour sometime
I don't
in the
feel like I have
days.
enough, I don't feel like I have enough content yet to put stuff under each of those questions yet. Which is part of the
Well,
reason I wanted to get with somebody else. So,
Sounds like we need a meeting.
I agree.
Yeah.
Why don't
Yeah,
we do our homework? Each of us look at the points at Maurice's document. Come up with our own version of how to address the points. And, have thought about it. And then we talk about it.
all right, I would, Karennthya, I want to find out what's going on with you in Google Docs, because having a single document that we can all, work on would help with something like this a lot better than throwing a bunch of Word documents around in email attachments. So
Do what's best for you.
if you need some assistance, I'm happy to help to try to sort that out with you. What did you say, Karennthya?
I just said do what's best for you.
Yeah, okay. I mean, Google documents were designed as collaborative documents. This is what we're doing. We're doing a collaborative effort here. Okay,
Okay.
should we identify a next meeting to deal with this?
Yes, I think we should.
Next week?
I have to look. We like Tuesdays at 7.
I can't do next Tuesday.
How about Tuesday after? I just schedule something for some Tuesday. Let's see.
Any chance anybody could do 6:30? A little earlier?
6:30, that works for me.
Yeah, 6:30 is better for me also.
Could be Wednesday or Thursday.
I'd prefer Wednesday or Thursday.
I cannot.
Thursday's better.
not, if it's next week, I can't do Wednesday. I could do Thursday, but I just am telling, what's his name? Jim Nash, that Thursday evenings are the best for me all around, and he's trying to get an organizing meeting together for the transportation committee, so.
It's not organized yet, right?
Pardon?
It's not organized yet.
No, it's not. He
Right,
just.
so let's go with
It's
Thursday.
Thursday at 6:30, the 25th.
And somebody has does anybody have their own Zoom?
Oh, the
Thought we were in the 4th.
25th. Yeah, we can do that.
What'd you say, Karennthya?
I don't know if this Zoom is available. This is the ANC, so
Oh, I see
So-
what you're saying.
So I could also do the 24th, which doesn't have that conflict, but. I
it
don't-
sounds like the 24th, the Thursday was the best date for everybody.
Thursday was better than Wednesday.
Yep,
Yeah,
at 6:30.
Let's do Thursday.
Okay.
All right. Race.
Okay, everybody.
I'm a maybe, so but okay.
You're a maybe? Okay.
But I check my email. I'm gonna stop.
This